So I am 71, and I am a social worker. I work at a hospital. Have a community of people that I'm connected to, and they all got interested.
You mean the
And
community being therapists?
mental health professionals
Okay.
who have now gotten interested. Like I know several people working underground, and I also know a number of people who are working, above ground with ketamine.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, so what happened was this friend of mine, had done an underground experience with psilocybin. She connected me to that person, and I met with her and said that I'd like to do this. And after hearing about my background, which involved some childhood traumatic experiences, my father, who was mentally ill, cared for me a lot when I was a child, poorly, I might say,
Mhm.
because my mother worked. And so he was kind of in charge of me, especially prior to my starting school.
Mm.
So, I have this, kind of neglectful experience. And
Mhm.
once she heard about that, she said that MDMA was she used the term biographical, like it was useful to kind of go into your biographical information with MDMA, and she thought that would be beneficial for me. One
What's
of the things
yeah.
that's important, I want to say, is that I have been taking for a number of years 5 milligrams of Prozac, which is, people say is like, I've had people say to me, like doctors, like my primary care doctor, well, why? That's like not doing anything. That's too low a dose to do something. Well, it did something for me.
Uh-huh.
So I was happy being on that dose. But the facilitator, who is a psychologist, by the way, and also has a practice of regular psychotherapy, aside from doing, these experiences underground. So I stopped the Prozac, which during the 6 week period where I had stopped it, I didn't feel like, bad or anything in particular, although I know the washout period is really, really long for Prozac.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned this facilitator is a therapist and a psychologist. So you had a sense, I mean, of her credentials. Of course, it's
Yeah,
hard to judge.
yeah,
You had that sense that this is someone with experience, lots of experience.
yeah. And
Yeah.
she had also worked, there was a place in where I guess they were like MAPS associated trials. I'm not quite sure who made it all happen, but one of our large hospitals, they were using MDMA for PTSD, and she
Yeah.
had been involved with that. So I knew she had a lot of experience, and I felt
Okay.
confident. And
Yes, so
psychologically,
she'd worked on MAPS trials.
right.
Right. Okay.
And she was psychologically, I imagine psychologically astute, although
Yeah.
I'll tell you that went in a different direction. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, when are we talking? A year ago?
No, this past October,
Okay. Right.
very recent,
So
very recent.
tell me then about it. I'd like to know, like, was
Yeah.
there a preparation session? Roughly what
Yeah.
does it cost these days? And then
Yeah.
about the experience itself.
Yeah. It was, how much was it? I think it was $2,100.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
$2,200. Well, so I
So,
had 2 sessions with her, prep sessions,
okay.
during which she tried to, she asked me about my I had one consultation where she heard about my background. And
Mhm.
then she had a several month waiting list. So as we got closer, maybe 6 weeks or 8 weeks, a couple of months ahead of the time, I met with her in once, and then maybe 2 weeks prior, another time,
So
where
how long was the waiting list? How long did you have to wait for?
I would say probably 4 months.
Okay, so she's
Yeah,
she's
she's busy.
busy.
But
Yeah.
she told me, I asked her about it. She says she does it every 1 to 2, a session every 2 to 3 weeks. So
Yeah.
she's not doing it,
Yeah.
she's got a
Yeah.
regular practice and all
Right.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So she So yeah, and the prep sessions, she charged me her regular fee of $300, which she was able to give me a bill that was appropriate for my insurance. So I got good
Yeah,
reimbursement for that. But
got
of
it.
course, not for the day of, which was the $2,200. So
Right.
I went there. I had stopped the Prozac. I went to her apartment. Otherwise, she works exclusively in her regular psychotherapy sessions remotely. This is
Yeah,
the only thing she does in person. So
yeah.
I went there. I could tell she was a very spiritual person. She had a lot of, spiritual icons in paintings around the walls, etc.
Psychedelic art type thing.
Yes, that kind of thing.
How was
Um,
that? Was that nice for
Well,
you?
I'm not that spiritual.
Mm.
I mean, in certain ways I am, but she's about 1,000 times more spiritual than
So
me.
you had a bit of a
So,
feeling of like when you go into a new age bookstore and you're like,
yes,
okay, I'm
very
in a
good.
different cultural milieu here.
Yes, exactly, exactly. So, yeah, that was kind of, and as when we got together, she had a couple of decks of cards. One was tarot cards, and the other was, I don't know, spiritual people, the spiritual people, etc. And then another deck of like spirit animals. So she had me shuffle and take them, and she read me the
This is
meanings.
not the only
And
MAPS therapist I've heard of who use tarot and spirit animals.
yeah,
I've heard this actually in another case as well, just
yeah,
recently. So
yeah.
how was that?
I mean, she then read me the descriptions and it was pleasant here. She had a very relaxing voice. It was pleasant hearing it and all that
What
kind
was
of
your spirit
stuff.
animal
Honestly, I don't even remember.
or your tarot card?
Oh, my spirit animal was something kind of strange. Not a rat, a weasel, which was kind of weird because I remember I once had an argument with my mother where she claimed I committed to something that I was trying to get out of, and she said, "You're trying to weasel out," and I. So that's what came to mind, which I didn't even share with her. I was trying to go with the flow, but that was my association. But apparently, weasels are very clever, and so that didn't seem all bad. And I have no idea what the tarot card thing was. Maybe growth. Don't they all have to do with growth
One would
somehow?
hope so, that she take out
Yeah,
death and
yeah.
okay,
Yeah,
okay.
she may have. She may have. And then the spiritual guide was some guy named Jawal Kool, some Indian master of something. But she started calling him. I don't know if this American music group, Kool and the Gang.
Sure.
And yeah, so she said cool, she started like joking, calling it cool because his name was Jawal Cool, spelled like completely differently, but she was calling them cool in the gang. I mean, she kind of has a sense of humor, which about the spiritual stuff, which I
Yeah.
sort of appreciated, right?
Yeah, sure.
So yeah, so I took the MDMA and one dose, and then she told me I would be taking the second dose a while later. She'd offer it to me, and she encouraged me to take it. And she said basically it doesn't intensify the experience; it lengthens the
Yeah.
experience. But one thing I want to mention was in the prep sessions, she was trying to tell me what the experience was going to be like. And you can't tell someone what the experience is going to be like, because you don't
Yeah.
know. You can
Yeah.
tell them
What was she
certain
saying?
things. She was saying that, things will come up, you will have things come up. What does that even mean? Are you going to have memory, like things, the way she just, I don't remember that well either because it
Yeah.
didn't have an impact really.
Did she talk about your inner healing intelligence?
Yes, she did. she did talk about that. One thing she really emphasized, which was important, what you said cued me, was the compassion towards self that allows things to come forth that perhaps you wouldn't allow to come forth or
Mhm.
feel shame, you would feel less shame about. And I have to say, and I'll get back to this later, that I, in fact, did experience that both in the moment subsequently.
Did she talk about parts? Like, did she use that kind of IFS type?
No, no, she didn't use the IFS stuff very
Okay.
much, which
So,
I'm
but
familiar.
you felt she was a little bit, from your perspective as a therapist, she was a little bit like, this is maybe a little bit directive. I don't want to overuse that word, but like a little bit like, this is what you're likely gonna experience.
Yes. And I felt like when I was there in the moment, like that day, she told me what I would experience, like in terms of time distortion, in
Mhm.
terms of like how I knew it was taking effect, what I might feel in my body, stuff like that, which I think I might have liked to have known prior, you
I
know?
guess, yeah, before you're
Yeah.
actually turning up there, of course.
Yes. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
interesting that that didn't come up in the prep sessions then.
Yeah. Yeah.
The prep sessions were more about your personal history.
They were more about my personal history and this vague sort of thing about things will come up. You will, you will feel less inhibited about talking about them, that kind of stuff. But it all sounded like it was sort of abstract to me.
Was there, to what extent did she tell you about possible unpleasant aspects, possible side
Zero,
effects? What?
zero,
Oh, zero?
zero.
Really?
Yeah. She said I might have memories, not like forgotten memories, but things might come up that were might feel a little uncomfortable to think about and talk about, particularly related to my childhood trauma.
Mm.
But it had this very abstract nature. Like
So
she
she
didn't tell
didn't
me what
say
to do when I felt that, or
she
yeah,
didn't say anything about you might feel nauseous when you come up. Uh,
no,
she didn't say that it might be challenging during the experience, it might be emotionally challenging, and she didn't
no,
say anything about possible difficulties afterwards.
definitely not that.
Definitely not.
Definitely not that.
Okay.
Yeah. And I felt like she didn't say anything, something you just said, nauseous, the experience. No, she did say one thing when I was there, before it took effect. She did say that if that she wanted to be very clear about boundaries, that she would be available to hold my hand if I needed it or to hug me if I needed it, but otherwise nothing else. So that was interesting because I was like thinking she didn't emphasize anything that negative. Why do I need that? So that was kind of weird.
Uh-huh. Why would I need to hold
Caught
something?
my attention. Yeah, why do I need that if, yeah, you
Yeah,
didn't mention
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So I took the medicine as she referred to it. And oh, she also had made a little altar for me on her coffee table, which was next to me with the cards from the decks, and she had a stone that said like peace or something. I thought it was nice that she
Yeah,
did that, but I didn't feel particularly attached to the altar. There was a
yeah.
candle. She said it was my candle.
So it's kind of
And
interesting. I mean, she didn't necessarily check in and say, "Hey, are you down with all the spirituals?"
yes, no, no, no. Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
here you are at temple. Okay. And how did you feel about her calling it the medicine? That's just a bit like neutral, whatever.
Oh, it seemed like a bit of an affectation to me,
Mhm.
but I didn't have any kind of real
Yeah, yeah.
negative. I mean, I thought like this is how it is,
This is how it
she
is.
is,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
probably how a lot of them are.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. So
You can
you
you can see I'm the type that kind of like questions a lot of things. or
So,
doesn't
so,
buy into
so
stuff that
you take the capital M medicine,
yeah.
and then what happens? You lie on a couch,
I
sitting up
lie on the
on a couch,
couch.
yeah.
She gave me, I was really, I felt chilly very quickly, and it might have been partially her apartment. Um, and so she put two blankets over me. She doesn't, I took off my shoes at the door anyway. Um, and oh, she had me write an intention. And I forgot to tell you that prior to coming. And I said I kind of wanted to get in. I can't really, I think I threw it out the other day actually, or maybe I saved it. I
Mm.
decorated it too. I guess I got in the mood.
Mhm.
Um, and I didn't was I had a little trouble writing it. I think I wrote it that morning or the night before. And I said, something about just kind of wanting to get in touch with things that are difficult for me to get in touch with, something like that. And if there's some lessons that I can learn about aging, that would be nice too. Something. And I gave it to her and she put it on the table.
Okay.
So, and then I also, my partner had given me these, I don't know what they're called, lingams, these stones.
Okay.
Yeah, he's a little more spiritual than me, although
Uh-huh.
a complete atheist. And he had given me these as a gift. So I brought them along that day because I thought if I
Yeah.
needed any kind of grounding, I'd hold on to them. I didn't.
Was there music?
Um, she played music, kind of new agey,
Hmm.
soft music.
Uh-huh.
I didn't, honestly, I didn't hear it.
Yeah.
I really, like, I heard it going on and then I didn't tune into it at all the
Okay.
whole time that I remember.
Right.
So I'm lying there, I put on the eye mask, and then I just basically started talking about my life. And she sat opposite me and she took notes. She took something like 8 pages of notes, which she gave to me when I left. And the actual experience was extremely pleasant.
Mm.
Um, I felt very free to talk.
Hmm.
I talked a lot about, my some difficult relationships, a past relationship with the man that I was in a long-term relationship with.
Hmm.
I had been married quite young. I
Hmm.
kind of talked about that, although that's mostly all resolved.
Hmm.
And I talked about my parents.
Okay.
And what was interesting that I sort of happened during the experience was that I felt that I had unresolved things about this long-term relationship, certainly unresolved things about my father. Um, but what really came up were issues with my mother, who I had always seen as kind of a hero,
Right.
um, as you know, uh, kind of making, despite her own difficult young life, um, ending this relationship with my mentally ill father, figuring out a way to take care of me and for us to have the best life that we could have.
Hmm.
So I always saw her as a hero. What came up was a lot of difficult stuff with my mother
Mm.
that I was totally aware of. I mean, they weren't,
Revelations.
yeah, they weren't revelations, but I always kind of excused them, didn't think they had much of an impact.
Mm.
And they did. I saw her as really not meeting, my emotional needs very well
Yeah.
as in my young life and even through my like until I kind of left home for college.
Yeah.
A lot of people had told me over the years your father did the best he could, which wasn't very good, by the way. And I always felt like that was inadequate. But during this experience, I started realizing maybe he did do the best he could because he was a
Hmm.
very troubled person. And
Hmm.
I also sort of, felt like I really don't need to think anymore about this long-term relationship that had a lot of issues. I can kind of let that go.
Yeah.
So those things happened during the session that were all ultimately useful, I think.
Yeah.
Um, what happened with the stuff with my mother, was part of the aftermath that was very challenging. But it was a very pleasant experience. I felt
Yeah.
relaxed. Um, at one point, she got up and she told me she was going to do this. She would get lunch, and I could hear her sitting there crunching on something. I was a little odd, like, why not drink a smoothie or something? I felt like it was what was a little strange to me. I don't know, maybe people do this, but it kind of felt like, we were on different planes at that point. Yeah,
Right,
yeah, yeah,
right, right.
yeah.
So you're
Uh,
talking all the way through it, or sometimes you're on a kind of inner thing?
I wasn't much in her. I kind of, and I think that's part of what made it a challenging experience in the aftermath. It was very activating for me.
Oh,
I
very
felt,
activating, right.
yeah, very activating. I wasn't really aware of it during the session, but I really talked a lot.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I'll mention more later about the aftermath, but I probably didn't stop talking very much for about 2 weeks.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Right.
So
So this was
at
about 4 hours,
7,
7 hours. Okay.
yeah.
And
So I took,
were you kind of somewhat high all that time?
yes.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
which is longer than you usually last, I suppose. We usually.
Remember, I took a second
Oh
dose.
yeah, right.
Yeah, to extend the experience.
Yeah.
So at the end of the experience, she said, I guess I kind of dried up there the last half hour and wasn't talking as much. And she said, I'd really like you now to, and there were times that I took the eye mask off and then I put it on, and I took it off. But when I took it off, I wasn't really aware of my surroundings. And I definitely had very serious time distortion because I thought maybe 45 minutes had passed. We started, I guess, about 10 after 10. And I asked her what time it was, and it was like 3 o'clock. So I had
Yeah.
a lot of time distortion.
Yeah.
So, so at the end, she told me put on the eye mask and kind of go inward. And I started having with the eye mask on, kind of visualizations,
Mm.
which was interesting. Like I saw this almond. I remember saying this, and she said, "You mean the nut?" And well, first, okay. And then, I kind of relaxed for a little while and just breathed, and then, I sat up and she gave me something, I think, to eat, or I had been drinking water with us. I asked for water at one point, and then she brought it to me and I said, "Do you have a straw?" And she kind of laughed at that and she went and looked around. She found a straw and I drank the water with the straw. I think she gave me either tea or I think she actually gave me some nuts, and she gave me almonds and some dried fruit or something.
Okay.
She had almonds. Maybe she wasn't going to give it to me. And I sat for a little while, and then I went home, and she was very insistent that I take a cab. So the next day I felt incredible. And that night I did talk to my boyfriend on the phone. He was very anxious to hear how it went, and I just
Uh,
told him a little bit about it. And I
uh-huh.
had a really long night's sleep. And then the next day I was off, and I kind of like did errands, and I really had the feeling that I was in slow motion
Mm.
as opposed to the previous day where I was so activated. So that day I felt very depleted.
Mm.
And then uh, the next day, the next day are a little blurry. I started to feel quite activated, like very souped up. And I, I was trying, I recognized it, and I was trying not to talk people's ears off, but I felt like I couldn't shut up. And the following, I guess it was Wednesday, I went for 5 days away with a really close friend to her house and I felt like I was really talking her ear off. But she wasn't telling me to be quiet. I was just
Hmm.
like talking about my whole life and like just very activated.
Right.
And I was like constantly wanting to go on walks and keep moving. And we did go to a yoga class, and I tried to shut up then, but I was very aware that I was very activated. And then I started to feel incredibly anxious, really anxious. Not about specific things, just like more panicky,
Hmm.
more panicky.
Hmm.
And I, the psychiatrist that prescribes the Prozac, I talked to her every 3 months. And when I first met her, I had already been on Prozac.
Mm.
And so I don't know how well she knows me, really. I mean, she kind of knows me, but it's not like having an intimate long-term relationship.
Mm.
But I said to her, something is not right. I am not feeling well. So I did see the facilitator for the integration experience.
Hmm.
And I felt like she was not helpful at all. I said, I'm really uncomfortable. I'm feeling anxious on the verge of panicky. It's not about specific things. I just feel like I'm walking around without skin. Like I just feel very, very uncomfortable. And she's like,
Oh,
well,
like oversensitive,
yes,
uncomfortable in your skin.
yes.
Yeah. Okay. And she said,
He
well,
said, well, this you need to think about your almond that settled you. You like making collages, try and work some of that out with collage. This is a good thing. These things were here all along. These feelings were here, but they were hidden from you. I just felt like I didn't know what I needed, but I felt like I needed something more.
mhm.
And I was saying like also like my boyfriend, my partner, who lives nearby, but we don't live together. Like he was very available to me to talk, and he is a psychoanalyst, and he was really helpful, like at like just letting me talk, and being supportive. But I felt like she wasn't. But he did something that annoyed me. I can't remember what it was. I was distracted or something, and he got a little annoyed with me, and I mentioned it to her, and she was like, "Well, that's very immature of him." And like, I don't know, that's not like why I was there.
Mm.
But I wanted help, so I did schedule a second integration session.
Which you
And
presume, is this all included by the by, or is
no, I
this
had to pay her again for to these two sessions, which
these two things?
again I could submit to my insurance because
Right.
these were, not
So it ends up being 2,200 plus
plus
600 for the two prep and 600 for the two
exactly.
integration. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was a lot of money for me. I mean,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
adding up. Yeah, and
yeah,
this is not cheap
yeah.
for as a
But I
treatment.
had saved up for a while from the
Yeah.
time that, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So, it was like probably in lieu of going on a vacation or something
Uh-huh.
like that.
Yep. Yep.
You
I get
know,
it. Yeah.
yeah. It was a financial commitment.
Mm.
So the second integration session, I felt like she was even less helpful because
When was that, by the by? What's the time?
probably another week later. So
So the
she called.
first was a
Yeah,
week
she called me the
after.
day after. I just said, I'm really tired. I feel very depleted. She said, just rest. So
Uh,
then it was like maybe 5 days later, and the next one was a week after that.
okay.
And I said, I'm so activated. I feel very souped up, and my heart is pounding.
Mm.
And she said, well, that's from the anxiety, I'm sure that will get better. And again, with these are things that are here all along. I just didn't feel like there was the support that I needed.
Hmm.
And then I said, I'm going to start seeing the therapist that I had mentioned to her that I had a consultation with in the summer. And she said, well, if that doesn't work out, I'd be happy to see you. Like, that was, I almost felt like leave me alone at that point, like I wasn't feeling very positively about her.
Uh-huh.
And that wasn't good. But who helped me was the psychiatrist
Uh-huh.
because I said to her, look, I don't know what's going on. And she said, I feel like you're kind of on the edge of a hypomanic experience.
Hmm.
And we need to settle you down. And you can restart Prozac. Let's get you restarted on the Prozac. But I
Who said
think
this?
the psychiatrist.
And how did you contact this psychiatrist?
Well, she was the person that had been prescribing me Prozac
I see.
that I
So,
stopped.
so
So I
the
knew her.
facilitator was not much help in the second session.
Yes,
And what it sounds like a bit is like she's got a very positive view of the
yes,
medicine and the range of possible outcomes.
yes,
So
yes,
whatever comes up, this is good. This is part of the
yeah,
process. This is, there's never like, oh, this could be a potential adverse effect.
exactly. Especially when I started having this physical
You're
symptom of the
talking about
pain.
cardiac, stuff,
Yeah,
anxiety that wasn't really there before. And yeah, as you say, clear kind of hyperactivation, over talkativeness, hypermania type stuff. But it's all like this is good,
yeah, yeah,
which is, that's a little, you know, that's a little surprising for someone who was involved in a clinical trial of this.
exactly. Like I kept on thinking, well, she must know what to do. I don't feel that she knew what to do.
Yeah, or she's just
Yeah,
very invested in it,
yeah,
so it's got to
yeah,
work. Of course it's going to work.
yeah.
So you
And my
then, yeah, go on.
So I was going to say, I mentioned to her, my friend who had did the psilocybin trip with her. I said, "Oh, Emily seems to have such a different experience. It was different medicine, but,
Mm,
um, and she said, oh, well, she had a different childhood than you.
mm,
Yeah. Anyway,
mhm,
I was wanting something.
yeah,
So the psychiatrist who had been prescribing me the Prozac, and I told her I'm going to stop the Prozac. I want to do the
uh-huh,
MDMA. She was like, I'll support whatever you want to do.
uh-huh,
This is what I suggest in terms of stopping it and, et cetera. So anyway, I had, and, that's why I said our relationship, we didn't know each other all that well. Like
mm,
she just kind of writes, how you doing on the Prozac? Good. Writes me a prescription. Let me know if any problem. So I called her up. I was really in trouble. And I said, all this is going on. And she said, we need to settle you down,
mm,
restart the Prozac.
mm,
But also, she's known me over time, and I have a little bit of anxiety when I fly, and so she's given me Xanax for that. I've never asked for more,
mm.
like she knows, like I'm very responsible of, So she
Yeah,
said, I'm going to give you like 10 Valium, and
mm,
take a quarter to a half when you're
mhm,
feeling on the panic.
mhm,
Like, let's get you through this period.
mhm,
But she also said, your father's diagnosis was a long time ago. He never was good in care. We don't really know what was going on, but there was some stuff that could have indicated bipolar.
mm,
And you have people with bipolar disorder on your father's side of the family, other people who were
mm,
clearly diagnosed.
mm,
You should not have been given MDMA. That's what she said.
mm, mm, mm. Did that come up? Was there kind of screening before for like family history?
She did ask me about she asked me about family history, but she asked me about my own experience of like psychosis. No.
Mm,
Yes, I've had some depressed mood
mm.
and um
But she didn't
it's,
ask about your parents?
she did, and I told her.
Yeah, you said your
Yeah.
father had some kind of
My father, yeah,
diagnosed mental illness.
serious. He
Yeah,
never functioned during his and had
yeah,
some long-term hospitalization. So
yeah, 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 yeah. Well, I
yeah.
mean, yeah, that
So
you
yeah,
probably, well, who knows? Yeah, I mean, I
who
think your
knows?
psychiatrist is right that you would not have been included in some trials just, because there
Yeah,
would be a potential risk there. But
yeah,
mm.
yeah,
So the
yeah.
psychiatrist thinks that you may have kind of the drug may have triggered some kind of hypomanic thing, which
Yes,
So how did you find it then with the Valium
It
and
was it was helpful.
yeah.
And the interesting, I probably didn't communicate very well with the psychiatrist when I told her I was going to go off of Prozac to have a psychedelic experience. Initially, I had wanted the psilocybin. I don't think I ever told her that it was revised, that it was changed. So she didn't have the opportunity to chime in then and say, oh, well, maybe that's not a good idea. So
Well, it can be
anyway,
the same kind of risk with psilocybin.
oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
Okay.
psilocybin can trigger a kind of a manic episode.
Yeah. So anyway, the Valium was helpful. She also said, because you have a pounding heart, I'd really like to have you see your primary care doctor and see what he thinks about it.
Hmm.
So I was like, all right. So I went to my primary care doctor, and I've known him for many years, and I was honest with him about the MDMA. He was curious. He was like, gee, I wonder what would happen if I took it. He got interested.
Uh-huh.
And so he did like some, he listened, he said, let's do a heart monitor.
Hmm.
So he did this really small little heart monitor where you're supposed to press the button when you feel, for 5 days. I had to wear it. You press the button when you feel something, and then that highlights it in
Hmm.
whatever the tracings are. So
Hmm.
I did that. And he also said, like, another reason for a pounding heart could be the MDMA, but who knows?
Hmm.
Anything's possible. Let's also do lab tests for thyroid. So he did that.
Hmm.
And I was like, oh, great. Now I'm into this whole medical thing on top of
Hmm.
this, right?
Hmm.
So I went back to him a couple of weeks later. He had the tracings, and he said, when you press that button, you felt something, but there was nothing abnormal on the tracings from when you pressed the button. However, you had an elevated heart rate a few times. Um, and let's look at where you were when that happened. It happened in the office when I was at work working. I could see the time, on the tracings, and there was nothing that I noticed at all. I was at my computer, handling stuff. So anyway, that happened, and then I I started with the new therapist, and I talked to her about my experience. And I would say that, I started out talking to her about all these things that came up about my mother, which, clearly it's something I need to deal with.
Hmm.
So that was at my advanced age that
Hmm.
I always kind of excused. So I guess it was helpful in that way.
Hmm.
The panic, I mean, I do feel like I have increased anxiety. The
Hmm.
feelings of panic have subsided to a certain extent, maybe in the last week and a half.
Which really okay. So this is
Yeah. October 11th was,
three months
yeah.
or so later. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
3 months. And
Uh,
I have taken the Valium less frequently, like when I feel like But because of the elevated heart rate, my doctor wanted me to see a heart rhythm specialist.
mm,
And so I went to see him. And I don't know if other people have told you about so much physical stuff. And so I told him about the whole MDMA. And he basically said the same thing as my doctor. I said, do you think it's possible? And he said, anything's possible. It
mm,
sounds like you got quite activated. He said, what I'd like to do is put you like on a beta blocker,
mm,
or it's nothing dangerous that's going on, but I could see how uncomfortable it is for you to feel
mm,
this pounding heart. He said
mm,
the elevated heart rate, who knows about that, but it's not harmful. Let's just put you on a beta blocker, a very low dose for 3 months and
mm.
see, what that does for you.
Okay.
And
So
that
you,
pounding heart is really bad. It's very uncomfortable. Yeah.
how's that responded to that
I
like
haven't started it. He called in the prescription. I just saw him last Thursday, I guess it was. So he called in the prescription to my mail order prescription. So it's supposed to come in the mail tomorrow.
so tell me if this is an accurate kind of summary that you developed new anxiety um, uh, and sometimes kind of panicky feelings. There was some kind of hypomania, over talkativeness, which seems to have reduced. What was the time frame for that kind of calming down?
I would say about 3 weeks.
In partly in response to this small dose of Valium, kind of once a day kind of thing.
Yes,
Uh-huh.
about once a day I would take it. Yeah, yeah,
The anxiety feelings lasted longer, kind of, and but has it really kind of gone down a bit in the last week or so? So that's kind of
yes.
about 3 months. And then there's these heart issues as well.
And
Uncomfortable.
also problems sleeping.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, in the initial 2 weeks. And when I have trouble sleeping, I take a CBD THC gummy, and the
Uh-huh.
psychiatrist said that's fine to take. And I did, and that did help me sleep
That
better.
did help. Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else as well in the mix, do you think? I mean, also to mention as well that I suppose the perhaps the useful aspect is the kind of the material that came forth, which was like, okay, there's stuff there around my relationship with my mother, and it sounds like you still feel that this is useful, that that was something useful that came from this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And I did, I talked a lot about
Mm,
when I felt anxiety, I did talk to my close friends
yeah.
and my partner about it, which was really
Mm,
helpful talking about
yeah,
that. And they would,
yeah,
they'd let me talk.
yeah.
And then they were also reassuring, like it's okay, you're okay,
Yeah. You
yeah.
got some good support,
Or
professional and
have good
social.
support.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I had started with the new therapist who,
Yeah.
was helpful. So the therapy, the Valium,
Yeah.
the
I mean, so but you had the potential to draw on certain resources to go to a heart specialist, to see a therapist, your boyfriend's a psychoanalyst and a psychiatrist. So that's all good stuff, but not everyone might necessarily have access to
absolutely,
those kind of
absolutely.
specialists.
I
Um,
also found one other thing that I found helpful,
hmm,
which is that I spend a lot of time listening to history podcasts.
mm-hmm,
The Rest is History
mm-hmm,
and other podcasts that I kind of felt like it made me that when I said like I wanted to take psychedelics to feel connected with the universe, that kind of made me feel connected with
mm-hmm.
universe, not, time,
Yeah.
others who have lived before.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. It kept my attention and also it made me feel grounded.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. There is a Stoic spiritual exercise called like the River of Time, where you like contemplate history and all the empires that have risen and fallen and everything that's gone before. And it's a bit of a cognitive distancing thing
Yes.
away from one's over rumination. And it's this sense of like the grand human drama.
Right,
Something like
right. And
that.
that's exactly kind of what I was doing.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah, yeah,
So, what would be your message as a mental health professional yourself,
yeah,
and as a kind of patient, to kind of this psychedelic culture and nascent
yeah,
industry?
yeah.
What
Well,
could
go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's it, really? Yeah. What would you like this nascent industry or culture? What do you think it could do better?
Yeah, I think I understand that it's got this, this uh, force forward, um,
Momentum.
yeah. And what did you say? I'm sorry.
Momentum?
Momentum, that's the word I was looking for.
Mm.
Yeah, it's got this forward momentum, and I think that's a good thing because I think it can obviously be useful, and I'm aware it's been very, very useful to many people, but I feel like there needs to be a better acknowledgement of the fact that you don't know what is going to happen.
Mm.
So it's not just you don't know what is going to come up in your experience. It's more the whole thing. Like you just don't know what. You cannot be prepared. And
Mm.
that more seriousness needs to, be given to that. And I've spoken to my friends who are involved in this psychedelic world about it. And perhaps I'm, like a lot of my friends in this world have had more sort of maybe stable backgrounds than I have.
Mm.
And, perhaps they're just primed to have a very different experience. But I feel like, hey, recognize this world, Um, and
It's so,
so I have
how do you mean
become,
recognize this world?
I meant recognize this comma world,
Oh, I see.
psychedelic.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
recognize what? The kind of
That it's not,
unpredictability.
yes, the unpredictability, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And how
What I
does
would,
that go down with them?
I think pretty well.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I think that, my friends that are working in this area are, it took it quite seriously because I think they're new to it.
Mhm.
And so they want to be,
Yeah.
aware. And I was very forthcoming with them. It's not, you know, yeah. So, my friend that works for this organization that's trying to work with schools of social work and nursing schools to train people to be psychedelic facilitators. I
Oh, yeah.
said to her, that's ridiculous. These social workers graduating from social work school don't know how to be therapists. They need additional training in that and
Mm.
supervision. But they're going to be psychedelic therapists? Like, come on. I felt like she didn't take it as well because she's working as an administrator for this organization. And, she's on, they're talking about, people who were suicidal, who took psilocybin and, now they love life.
Uh-huh. Best case scenarios.
Exactly. Best case scenario. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. And do you think there's things that for, I mean, so you feel, do you think that there could have been a way you could have been better prepared for it? um uh, to your satisfaction, like if the facilitator had said something like, look, there are some unknowns here, there is an element of risk here, this is still, somewhat new treatment, there's not a whole lot of data, do you think that there could have been something like that?
I think that would have been helpful. I also, listened to a lot of podcasts and did a lot of reading, and I really didn't see that much negative.
What
The only thing
stuff?
negative was the situations with boundaries with the
Uh-huh.
MDMA.
Yeah.
That was all, and I felt like that wouldn't
Yeah. And
I'm
what kind
also
of, yeah, where did you find that information? What do you mean? Where, like
well, there was
Times
a
or
yeah, there was I think my first exposure to it was this New York magazine, which is, I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's
uh-huh.
a magazine here. They had a podcast. I forget what it was
Oh yeah,
called.
power cut. Power cut.
Yes,
Yeah.
Power Trip. Yeah, I listened to that, but I didn't feel, I never felt like that I was
Yeah.
me. It was more
Right.
of an interesting, sad story, and I,
Yeah.
familiar with, people who have experienced, sexual boundary violations very often fall into those situations
Right.
again.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I didn't feel like that was something that applied to
But
me.
but not much about kind of the risks of adverse effects afterwards.
Nope. And I also think perhaps the facilitator was not a good match for me because she was so spiritual,
Hmm.
on the one hand. And then, I couldn't have known this before that she would only, not be able to really help me
Yeah.
um, yeah.
Well,
And the
she could have referred you. She could have picked up that maybe there was some adverse effects here, and then have some advice, refer you to like a psychiatrist maybe, or be open to like I don't know, those kinds of things. I mean, you would hope they would have a kind of plan in place for those people who experience adverse effects.
yeah, yeah. I felt like she couldn't even hear it.
Yeah,
You know, she
sounds like it.
couldn't even, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
this is great.
And
It's all this is part of the plan.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And coming to when I found, your article, and I was like, wow, this has happened to other people. And of course, I went right to this section about like what could help, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And then when I saw that there was a group and I
Mhm.
attended that first session, I mean, I felt like it was so, I mean, just knowing I wasn't alone because I started to, on top of all the other things I felt, I started to feel like, what's wrong with me? Like, obviously, there's something wrong with me because everybody has these wonderful experiences. And that really nipped that in the bud for me. Because
Yeah,
I
yeah,
saw that there are people that, are really struggling also.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, we don't know how many people have heart issues.
Yes.
Maps, well, Lycos and Maps is Maps and then Lycos, who are doing the FDA
Right.
trial, they failed to collect heart data. They were I think advised to do so, but they didn't. So we
Wow.
don't know the impact on hearts. And
Wow.
whether it can lead to like elevated heart rate and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah. Well, okay. I mean, thank you so much. Anything else you would want to add, Maeve?
No, I hope this has been helpful
Yeah, it's
for
really helpful. It's really helpful for and I think also helpful for this young field, which and
yeah,
there's lots of people in it trying to learn and trying to do better. And so there's some clear kind of takeaways of like being a bit more upfront in the preparation, being a bit more attuned to people in terms of their particular frame. They might not be from a kind of new age frame. But and then afterwards hearing if people are saying, look, I'm feeling kind of worse in a way. These are new things. And
right, right,
having a plan in place
right,
for how to support people if they experience those kinds of, adverse effects.
right, right. And also, like, was there a way on my family history to maybe put the brakes on?
Right. That's a
Yeah,
big one. Yeah. Like, screening and being more vigilant. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.